In April 1945, as the Allies invaded Berlin, Adolf Hitler retreated to his underground bunker. There, as Nazi Germany collapsed around him, the increasingly unstable Führer allegedly took his own life. But to this day, the exact details surrounding his demise are still debated. Did Hitler truly die by suicide, or did he manage to slip away? Join us as we delve into the conspiracy theories, final events, and the death of the Führer. Descent into madness. In the final years of World War II, Adolf Hitler's physical and mental health deteriorated. The immense stress of losing the war took a heavy toll, exacerbating existing conditions like Parkinson's disease. Hitler displayed visible signs of tremors in his hands and legs, a shuffling gait, and a forward-hunching posture, all indicative of Parkinson's, which impairs motor skills. His physician, Theodor Morell, had prescribed a cocktail of medications over the years, including amphetamines and barbiturates, which likely worsened Hitler's condition. Beyond the physical symptoms, Hitler's mental faculties and emotional state were also unraveling.
After the war, the obese doctor confessed to administering a cocktail of drugs: opiates, morphine, barbiturates, and possibly amphetamines.
During the last days, Hitler oscillated between states of delusion and rage. He obstinately refused to acknowledge the impending defeat, lashing out at generals who gave sober assessments of German losses. His judgment was increasingly clouded, his grip on reality tenuous. This detachment from facts on the ground led to reckless military decisions. Yet, when the dire situation was clear, Hitler fell into a depressive mood. Insomnia plagued his nights, his rest punctuated by nervous pacing. He sought solace in recollections of better times, nostalgically reminiscing to aides about his early political campaigns. But his final claustrophobic confinement and the incessant shelling outside frayed Hitler's nerves further. Outbursts of intense anger were common, at times devolving into hysteria. This emotional volatility created an atmosphere of tension, with subordinates often bearing the brunt of their leader's disturbed psyche. Albert Speer, having observed Hitler closely over the years, later concluded that excessive flattery and enabling by his inner circle had contributed to this mental unraveling. In the echo chamber of the bunker, reality could no longer penetrate. The true precariousness of Germany's position and wisdom of surrender never manifested to Hitler's warped mindset. His body and mind failed him just as decisively as his military ambitions. Downfall and last days in the bunker. By early 1945, the Allied forces were closing in on Berlin. The Red Army approached from the east, while American and British troops made inroads from the west. Germany's defeat in World War II was imminent. Realizing the capital would soon fall, Adolf Hitler retreated to his protective underground lair on January 16, 1945, the Führer bunker. This massive complex, with over 30 rooms, had been constructed yards below the Reich Chancellery. Its walls were 6 feet thick, with further subterranean tunnels leading to other key government buildings nearby. Designed to withstand bombing, it was going to be the nerve center of Hitler's last stand. The bunker was fully equipped with bedrooms, meeting rooms, a kitchen, and communication facilities. As he moved into this concrete cocoon, Hitler was a far cry from his peak years when the Nazi Empire seemed invincible. The strenuous war had taken its toll. His health was failing, but his ruthlessness remained. Even as Germany's fate was sealed, Hitler refused to surrender. Inside the claustrophobic bunker, Hitler presided over the last vestiges of the crumbling Third Reich. Surrounded by close aides and his companion, Eva Brown, Hitler still held out hope that shifting troop alignments could change Germany's fortunes. Orders for maneuvers and attacks were issued based on delusion more than tactics. The bunker atmosphere grew increasingly desperate and doom-laden. Hitler's final public appearance was on April 20, his 56th birthday, as he briefly emerged to award Iron Crosses to members of the Hitler Youth. But most of his final days were spent poring over maps and dispatches, raging at his commanders, and displaying paranoid behavior, the picture of a leader detached from reality. From failed artist to Führer. Adolf Hitler's path toward totalitarian dictatorship had humble beginnings in Austria. He was born in 1889 in the village of Braunau am Inn. As a child, his aloof father set strict rules, while his doting mother coddled young Hitler's sensitivities and ambitions. Hitler dreamt of being an artist. This passion led him to Vienna as a young man. But he faced harsh rejection, failing the entrance exams at the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts twice. Humiliated, Hitler grew embittered over this early life failure. With his artistic hopes dashed, Hitler drifted aimlessly as an aspiring bohemian in Vienna. But he admired the growing pan-Germanic movements there. Their nationalist rhetoric gave voice to Hitler's simmering prejudices, including anti-Semitism, which became an obsession. When World War I erupted, Hitler found purpose, enlisting enthusiastically in the German army. The war ended in defeat for Germany. Hitler was devastated and outraged by the Treaty of Versailles, which imposed hefty reparations on the reeling nation. He became convinced Germany was stabbed in the back by Jews, Marxists, and spineless politicians. These views aligned with the right-wing nationalist German Workers' Party, which he joined in 1919. With his captivating oratory style, Hitler was soon leader of the renamed National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party. Inspired by Mussolini's March on Rome, Hitler led the failed beer hall putsch of 1923, landing him in prison. But the attempted coup gained the Nazi Party's national attention. During his months in prison, Hitler dictated his autobiographical manifesto, Mein Kampf, which outlined his political ideologies focused on fierce German nationalism, virulent anti-Semitism, and the need for authoritarian leadership. But now, he pursued power through legal channels. His promises to undo the Treaty of Versailles, restore the economy, and return Germany to greatness resonated. By the early 1930s, the Nazis became the largest party in the Reichstag, but lacked a majority. Hitler was appointed chancellor in 1933 through political deal-making, soon solidifying his dictatorship.
But he's very ruthless in his advocacy for the state and German cause, and he's utterly committed to Nazism.
Within months, Hitler assumed absolute power and ruthlessly eliminated opponents. The Third Reich had risen with Hitler as its Führer. The young dreamer had transformed into a tyrant set on imposing his radical vision by force. Hitler restored pride, militarized Germany, and flouted the Versailles Treaty, enjoying widespread support. But his ambitions went further. Lebensraum, or living space, would be claimed through conquest in Europe and Russia. The invasion of Poland in 1939 set off World War II and Hitler's desire for the Third Reich to rule an empire, rule and path to world war. Upon taking power in 1933, Hitler and the Nazi Party moved swiftly to turn Germany into a one-party totalitarian state. Hitler assumed the title of Führer, depicting himself as Germany's savior. With complete control of the press and airwaves, Hitler's propaganda portrayed him as infallible. The Nazis quickly banned all other political parties and labor unions. The Enabling Act of 1933, concentrating power in Hitler's hands, marked the death knell for the Weimar Republic. Potential dissenters and opponents were either arrested, assassinated, or intimidated into compliance. The ruthless SS and Gestapo secret police forces ensured order through fear. Hitler also sought to bring German society in line with Nazi ideology. He strengthened the Hitler Youth movement of indoctrination. Books were burned if deemed contrary to Nazi values. Modern art was condemned as degenerate. Churches were pressured. Education and the press became tools of state propaganda. The myth of Hitler's infallibility was crafted relentlessly. Rearmament commenced in violation of the Treaty of Versailles, with Hitler withdrawing Germany from the League of Nations in 1933. Military spending skyrocketed, factories tooled up for war production, and new weapons were developed, including tanks, planes, and submarines. Between 1936 to 1939, Hitler's expansionism started actualizing. German troops reoccupied the Rhineland border with France. In 1938, Nazi forces annexed Austria and the German-speaking Sudetenland area of Czechoslovakia.
Austria is the obvious place for Hitler to begin. Germans and Austrians are linked by language, by culture, some would argue by ethnicity.
British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain's appeasement merely emboldened Hitler. The full conquest of Czechoslovakia followed in early 1939, but invading Poland in September 1939 finally triggered British and French declarations of war against Germany. World War II had begun, a war Hitler planned to win through blitzkrieg tactics, making use of their vastly enhanced military power. Within 2 years, the Third Reich went from a battered pariah state to occupying much of Europe. Hitler had gambled on his unyielding ambitions and won, so far. But his racial ideologies also took a darker turn, with discriminatory policies against Jews escalating, foreshadowing the horrific genocide that would epitomize his legacy. Waning days of World War II. By early 1945, the once seemingly invincible Third Reich was collapsing on all fronts. Hitler's streak of conquests had been reversed as Axis powers struggled against the overwhelming manpower and industrial might of the Allied forces. Crucially, Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union had stalled. His plan for swift victory through blitzkrieg fell apart in the vast expanse of Russia. At the epic Battle of Stalingrad in 1942 to 1943, the Red Army dealt the retreating Germans a decisive blow, losing over 800,000 men but destroying the elite of Hitler's forces. The Russian front became a grinding war of attrition that the outmatched Germans could not win. In the West, the Allies gained dominance after the immense amphibious invasion launched on D-Day in June 1944 succeeded in gaining a long-term foothold in France. Paris was liberated in August as German defenses crumbled. The unified Allied command overwhelmed the increasingly desperate German countermeasures. From both east and west, the Allied armies steadily encroached deeper into the Reich's territory during 1944 and into 1945. A massive aerial bombing campaign had also reduced much of Germany's industrial heartland to rubble. By New Year 1945, Hitler could no longer deny imminent defeat, but he vowed to fight to the bitter end. Inside Hitler's Berlin bunker, the mood was bleak and claustrophobic during these waning months. Hitler's health and psyche continued to deteriorate under crushing stress. Rarely leaving the bunker where he felt secure, his grip on reality was crumbling. Fantastical notions of turning the war's tide still gripped Hitler. Even as the Allies crossed Germany's borders early in 1945, Hitler concocted grandiose plans for troop movements that were no longer feasible. Orders to stand firm were defied or ignored. Dissenting voices pressed for surrender but found Hitler utterly intractable. By April of 1945, Soviet forces were encircling Berlin. Facing final collapse, die-hard Nazi loyalists nonetheless vowed to defend the capital. Hitler clung to his last shreds of hope, refusing to abandon his Reich Chancellery bunker. But with inevitability closing in, Hitler prepared for the end on his own terms. Amid the chaos and carnage, the death knell of the Third Reich was imminent. Hitler's demise neared, though controversy would surround his final hours and last acts of desperation. The woman at Hitler's side. Among the doomed loyalists in Hitler's bunker, Eva Brown provided one of the last vestiges of normality in the Führer's crumbling world. Brown had worked as an assistant and photographer when she was introduced to Hitler in 1929. She gradually became his mistress, residing in his alpine residence of Berghof. Their affair was kept hidden for many years, with Hitler wary of being tied down. But Brown was patient and devoted, tolerating Hitler's dominant personality and demanding schedule. She occupied her time with hobbies like photography and sunbathing, seemingly uninterested in politics. Brown provided Hitler respite from his duties, a dutiful and compliant companion. In the cramped bunker, Brown remained faithfully by Hitler's side as the Third Reich disintegrated. She acted as hostess for the bunker community, attempting normal meal routines and engaging Hitler in mundane conversations about their past together, distracting him from the harsh present reality. Braun has been portrayed as both manipulative and husky, but historian James O'Donnell concluded she projected a rather unfocused naivety, accepting her fate to stand with Hitler till the end. Her loyalty seemed boundless. In the final days, Hitler and Braun's relationship appeared genuine, not just one of convenience. Their attachment was evident when Hitler had Braun hastily marry him in a brief ceremony within the bunker on April 28, 1945. With defeat certain, Hitler wished to reward Brown and protect her reputation in death. The following day at lunch, those present described an intimate and relaxed farewell scene between the newlyweds. Less than 40 hours later, Hitler and Brown perished together in a suicide pact. Brown willingly swallowed cyanide, showing no hesitance to follow her husband in death. Her decades of affection for Hitler transcended any instinct for self-preservation. In the process, she gained her sought-after goal, legitimization as the official spouse of the Führer at the very end. The Führer's final act. In the early hours of April 30, 1945, inside the fortified Führer bunker beneath the crumbling Reich Chancellery building, Adolf Hitler and his new bride, Eva Brown, made final preparations for their agreed-upon dual suicide. After nearly 14 years of Nazi rule, with Berlin succumbing to Soviet forces just blocks away, Hitler's promised final stand was at last collapsing. The day prior, Hitler's closest confidant Hermann Göring had effectively surrendered to the Allies by telegram without Hitler's approval.
One of the first war criminals is captured, Hermann Göring.
Enraged at Göring's perceived betrayal, Hitler stripped him of all positions and had him arrested. He would not abide capitulation, determined to die in Berlin rather than face possible humiliation and trial. Hitler first testamentally split his assets between the Nazi Party and AIDS, bequeathing his art collection to a proposed museum in Austria. Then, after lunch on April 30, Hitler and Brown somberly bid the bunker community farewell, retreating to their private suite around 2:30 p.m. According to Hitler's valet, personal aide, and multiple accounts, a gunshot rang out from Hitler's quarters around 3:30 p.m. His valet opened the door to find Hitler slumped over, soaked with blood from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. His wife lay near him. She had ingested a cyanide capsule. Their bodies were carried upstairs and hastily burned in the bombed-out Reich Chancellery garden. In his final testament, Hitler reiterated his political justifications and railed against the Jews for causing the war. His extreme ideological views shaped his chosen demise as a final statement. Having learned from Benito Mussolini's fate, Hitler refused to be paraded through the streets as a war trophy. He wished to deprive his foes of the pleasure of seeing him defeated and disgraced. Some fringe theories posit Hitler actually escaped Berlin, but eyewitness accounts of his suicide are deemed credible, and the charred remains buried and recovered by Soviet forces matched Hitler's dental records. His 68th birthday only days earlier on April 20 likely marked his true final appearance to his deluded public, bestowing awards to Hitler Youth Child soldiers mere miles from crumbling defeat. Two followers unified in death by cyanide pill and bullet, the Hitler and Brown suicide pact mirrored the merciless end that their Third Reich had come to merit from the judgment of history, Soviet examination of the remains. In the chaotic aftermath of Hitler's suicide in the bunker, details around the discovery and handling of his mortal remains are mired in secrecy, confusion, and lingering doubts. As Berlin fell on May 1, 1945, Russian forces overtook the bunker complex. An intensive search commenced for the burnt corpses of Hitler and Eva Brown. A week later, the Soviet secret police unearthed two badly damaged bodies from a crater near the bunker exit. Autopsies were conducted in secret at a Soviet military hospital that same month. These examinations posited that Hitler died from both cyanide poisoning and a gunshot wound. For unclear reasons, the Soviets did not reveal their find, omitting details of Hitler's demise and the condition of the remains from official reports. Verification would have held immense symbolic value for Soviet Russia and the Allies, yet Stalin's regime remained evasive and misleading on the matter, possibly doubting the autopsy results, or more likely covering up the bungled retrieval which damaged the remains. Not until 1968 did the Soviets admit to possessing a portion of Hitler's skull and jawbone. Even then, the official Soviet line implied they were unaware if Hitler was alive or dead. In 1970, the Kremlin finally allowed Western journalists to inspect fragments of a skull containing a bullet exit hole, supposedly proving Hitler's suicide. But the skull shard appeared to be from a woman, not matching Hitler's DNA. Significant parts of both Hitler's and Brown's skeletons were also never accounted for. In the 1990s, after the Cold War ended, Russia granted Western researchers access to their Hitler files from 1945. Examinations confirmed the skull was indeed female, but the maw fragments matched Hitler's dental records. So the key physical evidence indicates Hitler perished from gunshot and cyanide in the bunker, alongside Brown. But the incomplete remains and haphazard early analysis gave life to misinformation and conspiracies that still linger today. Myths of Hitler's survival. Given the chaos in defeated Germany and the secrecy surrounding his death, it was perhaps inevitable that theories would arise claiming Hitler actually escaped Berlin and survived past 1945. Fueled by ambiguous physical evidence and Stalin's early skepticism, many found it hard to fathom such a larger-than-life figure simply perishing amid the rubble. From the late 1940s into the 21st century, numerous accounts place Hitler alive and in hiding after the war. Furtive sightings were claimed in locations like Colombia and Argentina. Wild theories had him living in underground Antarctic bases, Switzerland, or the moon. Several people even claimed to actually be Hitler years after his confirmed death by suicide. The most common narrative is Hitler boarding a submarine in the Baltic and setting up in the remote countryside of Argentina or Paraguay. The region offered shelter to numerous fleeing Nazis after the war, like Adolf Eichmann and Josef Mengele, and the Hitler family did reside in Argentina earlier in the century. In these escapist myths, Hitler sheds his former identity, taking up new names and disguises to blend in. But his continued influence is often imagined as secretly inspiring neo-Nazi activity globally. Others posit Hitler died from natural causes decades later, still veiled from history's judgment. So what bred this outgrowth of pseudo-history and denial? The lack of a universally accepted body was a primary factor. The prospect of Hitler living on as a mystery fugitive proved more intriguing than suicide in a bunker. General public credulousness toward wild theories and media fueling sensational claims both fed the phenomenon. Human tendency to craft more appealing realities than the disturbing truth likely plays a role too. However, extensive evidence confirms these survival accounts as utter fiction. Eyewitnesses in the bunker conclusively saw Hitler shoot himself dead. The skull fragment with an exit bullet hole corroborates this. Hitler's preferred method, if captured, was suicide by cyanide, which he did ingest. Escape from Berlin amidst total Soviet control was borderline impossible. While tantalizing and cinematically memorable, the trope of Hitler escaped to plot again crumbles when scrutinized. But it does reveal our culture's morbid fascination with rewriting history if the reality proves too discomforting or definitive. The Allies' skepticism and investigation. In the aftermath of Hitler's reported suicide, the Western Allies did not instantly accept this version of his demise. Wary of potential German misinformation, they sought to verify Hitler's fate through intelligence gathering and physical evidence. The Nazi reputation for deception and use of body doubles bred natural skepticism from American and British officials. Amidst the fog of war, they required tangible proof before declaring Hitler dead. If propaganda portrayed him alive in hiding, it could inspire Nazi resurgence. Furthermore, recovery of the body would be a monumental symbolic victory. Before Berlin's capture, Allied leaders had suggested Hitler might escape via aircraft or U-boat. To prevent the spread of false hope, they aimed to conclusively confirm the circumstances around Hitler's death. The British and Americans marshaled significant resources immediately after the war to investigate. The British formed a unit called Hitler's Graves to uncover evidence in Germany. Field officers collected physical samples and eyewitness testimony in Berlin. MI6 interviewed Hitler's dentist, Kata Heusermann, who escaped to Britain, to check dental records. American intelligence also amassed interviews, including Hitler Youth members present during his final hours. However, Allied investigators faced major obstacles. The Soviets had seized Berlin and were extremely tight-lipped about Hitler for several years. Not until 1968 did the KGB reveal possessing his alleged jawbone fragments. Western allies only gained access in the 1990s after the Soviet Union's collapse. Seeking corroboration, the Americans located a skull X-ray from 1933 that evidenced skull dimensions matching the Hitler bone shard held by Russia. This strengthened the Soviet claim, but cracks remained in the verification. Allied intelligence agencies scoured global sources for Hitler's sightings, sending agents rushing to follow cold leads, but no concrete proof ever materialized of his survival. The exhaustive, extended probes essentially corroborated his death while uncovering the lack of substance behind whisperings of his escape. In the end, testimony from bunker witnesses recovered dental work, and later DNA testing essentially dispelled Hitler's survival myths. But the Allies' early skepticism and rigorous verification efforts arose from justified uncertainty in the aftermath of war, when competing narratives abound. Their commitment to investigation exemplified determination to achieve closure regarding the death of one of history's most storied despots. Forensic science on the Führer. In the decades since Hitler's death, modern forensic science has endeavored to conclusively examine the remains attributed to him. Advanced techniques offer the potential to settle lingering doubts. In 1998, scientists were granted access to the Russian skull fragment with a bullet hole. Though the sliver was deemed female, the jawbone was conclusively matched to Hitler's dental records, seeming to prove he died by cyanide and gunshot in the bunker. In 2018, the bone fragments underwent DNA testing by French researchers against genetic samples from Hitler relatives. This also substantiated their authenticity. However, in 2019, new doubt emerged as American scientists declared the skull sliver likely came from an unidentified woman just 40 years old, casting skepticism again on the Russian fragments. While dental records confirm Hitler's jawbone, other key bones are still missing, leaving gaps in verification. Advances like 3D modeling of the skull offer additional forensic routes to conclusively proving his death someday. But until then, tiny slivers of uncertainty remain ripe for speculation, even as most evidence affirms suicide on April 30, 1945. Modern science has bolstered the case but not fully closed it, as some fragments traced to Hitler have now seemingly been disproven as his trials and denazification. Adolf Hitler's death utterly transformed the political realities of post-war Europe. The Third Reich collapsed completely with the loss of its charismatic authoritarian leader. This left the path open for the Allies to reshape and rebuild Germany. The conclusion of fighting also allowed long-delayed Allied war crime trials to begin promptly in 1945. These military tribunals brought charges of aggression, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and belonging to banned groups. The landmark Nuremberg trials saw Hitler's highest-ranking surviving Nazis prosecuted, including Hermann Göring, Rudolf Hess, and Karl Donitz. 12 prominent Nazis received death sentences. The tribunals set new precedents in international law. Past 1945, a formal process of denazification commenced in Germany to purge Nazism and militarism from administration, media, academia, business, and other sectors. Former party members faced employment bans and restrictions on activities. The Allies saw eradicating Nazism as crucial to German rehabilitation. With Hitler gone, the Cold War's bipolar power dynamic swiftly emerged between the US and the Soviet Union. Germany itself was split into capitalist West Germany and communist East Germany for 45 years. The post-war Allied cooperation that defeated Hitler soon evaporated, but rapid Soviet, American, British, and French prosecution of surviving Nazis ensured the crimes of Hitler's regime were confronted before geopolitics totally shifted. His death opened the way for rebuilding, military tribunals, and societal transformation in Germany that may have been impossible had he lived. Mysteries and myths in media. The media has played an important role in shaping public perspectives on Hitler's death over the past 75 years. In the immediate aftermath of World War II, media narratives aligned closely with prevailing political viewpoints. Former enemy nations promoted rumors of Hitler's survival to sow confusion, while Allied media focused on bolstering the official narrative of his death in the bunker. As the Cold War emerged, Hitler's demise was woven into propaganda battles between capitalism and communism. During the post-war era, the final days of Adolf Hitler became a recurring theme in documentary films and historical bestsellers. Early works like Hugh Trevor Roper's The Last Days of Hitler solidified the historical account of Hitler's suicide. However, in subsequent decades, a proliferation of mass paperback books and movies presented sensationalized portrayals, playing loosely with facts to generate intrigue. Later, a surge of conspiracy theories emerged, fueled by dubious claims in bestsellers such as Grey Wolf, The Escape of Adolf Hitler. Mainstream media eagerly amplified these spectacular, yet unsubstantiated stories about Hitler's supposed submarine getaway. The internet age brought a proliferation of competing accounts, both well-researched and speculative, all instantly accessible globally. Online discussions dissect the minutiae of Hitler's final evidence, often blurring truth and misinformation. Yet despite distortions introduced by an overabundance of media representations, the archival record remains the vital bulwark against historical revisionism. Though the narratives multiply, primary facts stand affirmed. The Führer's shadow. Hitler's tyrannical legacy remains one of the most scrutinized in history. His death failed to fully erase the poisonous impact of his genocidal ideology and the trauma of Nazi atrocities. Germany itself bears deep scars from its dark chapter under Hitler's rule and defeat in World War II. Constructing a functioning democracy from the ruins required sustained effort and cultural change. Vigilance against any Nazi resurgence remains necessary even today. Hitler's enduring infamy underscores the thin line between democracy and authoritarianism. Charismatic leaders with ruthless ambition can all too easily lead societies astray. Institutions that constrain power are vital safeguards. Propaganda and coercion turn citizens toward complicity alarmingly fast. While Hitler's death finished his regime, its horrific consequences persist. Holocaust remembrance, education against hate, and active anti-racism are paramount to counter residual bigotry rooted in the Nazi era. Confronting horrific past mistakes helps inoculate future generations. But frequently, re-emerging neo-Nazi movements prove the dangers are never fully extinguished. Hitler's poisonous beliefs outlived their architect, underscoring how hatred can endure if not actively opposed at all turns. So Hitler's baleful influence tragically lingers despite his death in rubble 75 years prior. Its resurfacing today warns eternal vigilance is essential, lest mankind repeats the darkest chapters once thought solidly confined to history books. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.